Applique Foot includes buttonhole centered itself and
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today we're going to go over how to use the braiding foot. This is a great foot for adding any of those cool decorative embellishments like ribbons and rickrack and little braids. It's super fun to use, it's super easy, and I'm going to show you exactly how to get started. So here's our braiding foot. It's a simple snap-on. It has a couple parts. This right here is a screw that you can adjust the front plate forward or backward. You're going to adjust this backward if you have a smaller braid, forward if you have a larger braid. It's mostly so that the braid can be kind of snug as it's passing through, and you'll see this better when we're actually sewing. Now on the back, I'm going to turn it over, is the groove. It's going to help the braid pass through the machine more easily, and this is also your width indicator. You don't want to use a braid or ribbon or elastic that's any wider than this back groove. So to install it, all we have to do is take off the foot we have on, move that out of the way, and slide it under. Go up, there we go. Oh, there we go. And we are ready to start sewing. So first let's add some ribbon. This is about as wide as you want to go for this, and this is how you're going to insert nearly all of your embellishments. First, we're going to go in from the top and just push it through there. It'll go under the back. If you need, you can use your tweezers or a seam ripper or something like that to get a hold of it and help you pull it back even more if you need to. Because I like to have a little bit in the back hanging out. So now that we have it in there, let's go ahead and just add some fabric. And you can use any kind of stitch you want. Use a zigzag or a straight stitch, whatever's your fancy, and just start sewing. Now the great thing about this is that it guides so perfectly. So if I had a straight line that I really needed to follow, I don't have to worry about going off track or anything. If I want to do maybe some turns, I can do some turns in there. It's really cool. You can do a lot of fun decorative stuff with this foot. And I know that it's getting fed evenly. Lots of fun. And I'll show you what it looks like. Pretty neat. You can have a lot of fun with lines and swirls and kind of doing the couching thing. It's really neat. Now, in my opinion, one of the coolest things about this foot is that you can use elastic. So what I'm going to do, well, it's just thin elastic, but what I'm going to do is take the foot off so I can show you better how I insert it. I've got it cut at an angle. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to try to keep my hands out of the way as much as I can. Just going to put it back in there, pull it to the back. See how that's in there? And then I'm going to put it back on the foot. Now I've got a little tail in the back because I find that it's easier to sew if I have a little tail. Let me get my fabric, put it underneath, put a few anchor stitches in there. I've got this out of Zig Zag. Oh, sorry, move the machine a little bit. And here we go. I'm going to pull the elastic a little bit and I'm going to hold it from the back. And you can see how easily this will feed and how accurately. I think a lot of us struggle with sewing like small elastic like this. So this is kind of a great foot to have if you have to sew elastic. And you're trying to get those even gathers. This is really important to have. And I can follow the seam allowance on my needle plate. I can pull it even tighter if I want. Love using this for elastic. Now let's go ahead and take a look. Ideally you would backstitch, but for demonstration purposes, let's just pull this out. And look at that! Woohoo! Perfect! And it stretches. It's got the nice stretch. It's clean and even. Very cool. Now I've installed some braided yarn. I just braided it myself. We're gonna go for a cool couching effect. Go ahead and put in some clear thread. We don't want it to show. We want it to look like it's kind of just laying on top of the fabric. Put it underneath there. I'm gonna go ahead, straight stitch. I'm gonna increase my stitch length to about a 3.5 because I don't want any puckering, but I can adjust it as needed. And here we go, let's just start sewing. I have to adjust it. There we go, let's see. So I want it to look like the yarn is just kind of laying on top of the fabric. And it gives it a cool texture, it gives a lot of fun line design. It's a great decorative option. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like. See, with the monofilament thread, you really can't tell that it's in there, but it looks really neat. It's really fun. You can see the braided design. It's definitely something you want to go ahead and just give a try and see what happens. So when you're going to insert a thread or ribbon or whatever that's a little bit smaller, you can just put it in like this, and then you can adjust this wheel to fit the width a little bit more securely. So like I've already loosened it. I'm gonna move it up just a little bit. It'll give my ribbon less opportunity to move around. So I'm gonna have to just try to keep my hand out of the way. Now I'm gonna tighten it. And so that it holds it in there just a little bit better. Pull it through the back and put it on my shank. Now we're gonna put the material underneath. And you can see it works just as well when it's even with the smaller embellishments. Got a straight stitch on. I'm using monofilament thread again. And the contrast of the satin and the faux leather is kind of cool. And let's take a look. And remember, it does come with a little manual for extra information. So to purchase your braiding foot, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or check us out on Google+, on Twitter at sewingparts, or on Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline. Hey everyone, this is Sarah with sewingpartsonline.com, and today we're going to be going over the fringe looper foot so we can add some really cool decorative elements to your projects. So this is our fringe and looper foot. As you can see, it's a snap-on. So how this thing works is it has this bar right down the middle, and your stitch is going to zigzag back and forth over, creating the like 3D loops. So to install it, all we have to do is take off the pressure foot we have on, slide it underneath, and there we go, ready to sew. So now that we have everything installed, we can get ready to sew, although there's a few things we want to go over first. When I first got my foot, when I put the shank on, this bar in the middle and the shank were touching. So when I would try to zigzag, the thread wouldn't pass through. So to fix that, just take like a little screwdriver just like this, and not while it's on the machine, but just take it off and kind of push the flange down a little bit so it's out of the way. It's not very hard, just takes a few seconds. Other thing to notice is you'll be using a zigzag stitch. For the widest possible, bring yours up to about a 7.0 width, and then bring your length down to about a 0.5, between like a 0.5 and a 1. So that you make sure that nothing's gonna hit that metal bar. There we go. And your tension should be lower. So like my tension right now is, my tension right now is at 0.5 on my machine. So I'm just gonna back stitch and I'm gonna start sewing. Here we go. So you see here I drew like a butterfly design. This foot is really great for decoration, obviously, but it's also has practical uses too, and we'll go over both of those. So it goes kind of slow because the stitch length is so short. And then it does, you can sew curves. Just kind of go slowly, that's all. And I'll show you how it's starting to look now. You can see back here it's got the 3D pop. So with this foot, you don't have to keep your stitch width all the way up at 7. You can bring it down to make, you know, smaller, finer, detailed lines. However, all you have to do is pay attention to the bar. Make sure the needle is not going to hit that bar, and you're totally fine. So for these antennas, I'm going to make my loops just a little bit smaller. And back stitch. And I'm not going to use my thread cutters. I want to keep the thread long so I can knot it off if I'm worried about them coming out. And so I would do the same thing over here, and then maybe use like a flower stitch foot for the smaller circles. But you can see how much potential this has as a decorative feature in your sewing. So this is the fringe and looper foot. So I'm going to show you how to make some fringe. Keep all the settings that we just had. We want stitch length at 0.5, stitch width at 7. So here we go. Oh, and tension down. So do a little back stitch. And we're just going to make some loops first. Okay. Now that we have our loops made, we're going to have to switch our feet to like a straight stitch foot or whatever you can do, like a zigzag foot. I think you can do a straight stitch on. Ah. And go to a straight stitch. If you have one that kind of doubles back on itself, that one's really great. If not, just shorten your stitch length as much as you can. And we're going to sew a straight line right along the edge. And move your tension back up. And then you're going to get your little scissors and cut this just like that. Woo, cool fringe. And then just, you know, do this on the back if you want to. Some of the threads will come out, but the main focus is up here. Pretty cool. Now, if you don't want your fringe to have this frayed look, that's okay. We have another way to do it so where the loops stay intact. So we're going to do exactly what we did before. Okay. We're going to pull it out and look at the back of your stitch. You see the white bobbin thread is right here. So we want to sew our straight stitch on the opposite side. We don't want to sew over the bobbin thread. So go ahead and get your other foot out. So now that I have my regular foot back installed for a straight stitch, I'm going to sew real close to the edge right here. So on this side underneath the fabric is where the bobbin thread is, and I'm sewing over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do my stitch. And depending on the look that you want, how close you want the kind of fringes to be, you can increase or decrease the stitch length of the straight stitch we're doing. Now we're going to go to the back side. So this is my straight stitch, and the white bobbin thread that's kind of, you know, popping up, that's the bobbin thread. So that needs to go. Comes right out. And then bring all those threads over to the front. And pull them out like this. And there we go. It's not frayed and it looks pretty cool. So this foot also has a great practical application. It's really awesome for doing like basting stitches or marking, you know, the tailor marks or alterations on fabric or whatnot. So I went ahead and did my stitch width at 5.0. Just I don't want to hit that bar. And then I kept my stitch length at like 1.4. Just keep it the same. Adjust your, of course, since we have a bar right there, you need to keep your tension a little bit lower. But you just go ahead and sew and say I was doing darts or something. And I needed to mark that. The benefit is it's very, very easy to remove the stitches. I just turn it over and pull on the bobbin thread. Just like that. And all the stitches come out in seconds. Well, except that one. There we go. Very easy. So that was the fringe looper foot. To purchase your fringe looper foot or any of the decorative threads that we used, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or at Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline.
The next foot we're going to take a look at is the 7 to 9 hole quilting foot. And I have to admit that I had one of these feet for years, and every time I looked at it and thought about using it, I was convinced that it would be too difficult, so I just left it in the package. When I did use it, I found it to be just an awesome foot, and I really enjoyed what I was able to do with it. Now, basically what you're going to do is you're going to take some cording like I've got here. It's about like a number 5 embroidery floss, and we're going to feed a piece of the cording through each of these 9 holes. They make this foot in a 5-hole version, and this one is the 7 to 9 hole version. You can use it loading all 9 holes or only 7 of the holes. We're going to do all 9 holes. Now, if you have cording that's a little bit bigger than this, and you find it won't feed, you can't load it through those holes, an alternate version of this foot is also this 3-hole. It's called a 3-hole yarn foot, but it works on the very same principle. Okay, so let's look at the foot, kind of understand how it works. We're going to actually load the thread through these holes, and then we're going to pull the thread to the back. Let me just see if I can do one real quick here. and in a minute I'll load up all 9 of them. And then basically once all the holes are loaded, we're going to stitch over this cording with a decorative stitch that will cover all 9 strands of thread. The way the foot works on the back is that, as you can see here, it's grooved so that as you go over this cording, it'll move smoothly and allow your foot to feed smoothly across the cording. Now, I couldn't find this foot, and I wound up a while back ordering one, buying one from eBay, and when I got it and got to looking at it, I discovered it was a knockoff foot, and it didn't have this groove on the back, and so the foot just simply would bog down when you tried to sew across the cord. So be sure you get an authentic foot. This one cost me about $20, I think. Here's an example. If you're going, what could I use that for? I don't have any daughters or anything cute that I've made for my daughters, for my granddaughters. But here's an example of a block that I made, and I used this foot for the stem of this flower. And so yeah, I was able to, I think here I went over it twice to widen it out, but makes a really pretty stem of a flower, decoration across a pillowcase, around a little girl's dress. Lots of different possibilities for this foot. Okay, I've got all the yarn loaded in the foot except for the last hole, and I thought I would show you one more time. Be sure what you do is to load the yarn through the hole going from the top of the foot toward the back. So let me get this where I can see my last little hole here. I'm going to pull that yarn through to the back, and then you can see that what I've got is those 9 strands of yarn, and you can see here the yarn's going to go under the foot, that groove I was telling you about, and you'll want to pick a stitch, a zigzag type stitch or some decorative stitch that covers the entire width of those 9 strands. And then sometimes what I do, just as I'm moving this from my countertop to my machine, is I'll just take and put a little knot here in the end to try to keep these from unraveling on me. I can do that. Okay, not real critical, but then that kind of keeps you straight. You don't want to tie these off because your foot, they're going to be feeding through your foot. Get that turned around like this. Okay, and the holes keep these straight and smooth while you stitch over them. Obviously, the length of the strands that you cut is going to be determined by the area that you want to cover. Okay, so I'm going to take it over here to my machine. I'm going to take it over to my machine. I'm going to snap my foot on. Keep those the tails I've knotted together out of the way. Okay. And then I've chosen just a dark piece of fabric that you can see, and I put a little stabilizer behind it since it's just a narrow piece of fabric. But what I want to do now is to find a stitch that will cover those 9 strands. And there's a lot of different possibilities. I think I'm going to choose this honeycomb stitch. And according to what I can see on my screen, is the default width is about 6 millimeters. But I'm going to, you can zoom in on the needle here. I'm going to make a couple of stitches just to test to see if that would cover. I'm pretty sure it won't at 6 millimeters. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have to, pretty close, but I'm going to widen it out just a little bit just to make sure that all 9 strands are covered. And you can make it curve. area you want to cover, just pull it off, just snip off the threads and bobbin, and there you go. And that is your 7 to 9 hole cording foot. Obviously, if you'd use that 3 hole foot, you would choose a little bit narrower stitch, but you would be able to, it would work the same way, and you could put on some yarn or whatever decorative material that you wish to embellish your fabric with.
The edge joining foot is used to sew fabric edges together side by side. This foot can also be used for stitch-in-the-ditch sewing, such as on quilts. Most models of this foot are snap-on style, though some may already have a presser foot holder attached. In either case, the edge joining foot functions the same way. There is a vertical, blade-like protrusion at the center front area of the foot, which is used to guide fabric edges while stitching. To do stitch-in-the-ditch sewing, set the needle in center position, aligned with the vertical blade of the foot. The blade will act as a guide as you sew, placing the stitches perfectly within the seam lines. To join fabric edges, first fold under and press the fabric edges, making sure they are straight. Place the fabrics so that the folded edges are touching the vertical blade positioned between them. Set the machine for a stitch wide enough to catch both fabrics. Some stitches that work well for this are the zigzag stitch, multi-stitch zigzag, feather stitch, as well as several decorative stitches. Experiment to find the look you want for your project. When joining fabric to lace or other trim, best results are achieved if the lace or trim has a flat header. Fold under and press the fabric edge. Place the fabric and lace or trim so that the edges are touching the vertical blade position between them. Stitch in a similar manner as for fabric-to-fabric sewing.
Applique Foot includes buttonhole and centered itself in our...
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today we're going to go over how to use a straight stitch foot. So this is our straight stitch foot. There are a couple things you'll notice about this that's different than like a standard zigzag foot. Your hole opening is only large enough to fit the center position needle. Right here you have 3 little grooves. These are each a millimeter apart. This is going to help you with more accurate top stitching. This is a snap-on, by the way, very easy to install. On the back, you'll see that it's just got this little groove pathway right here. This whole foot is going to glide over fabric very easily and only accommodate the thread back here. It sounds kind of confusing, but it works really well. So to install it, all you need to do is take off the foot you have on, and it's snap-on, so it's just pop, get my hand out there, pop it right off. Slide this under, snap it on. Make sure your needle is in the center position, and after I get this thing threaded, we will be ready to go. So the straight stitch foot has a bunch of different functions. One of the most important ones is that it sews very easily over lightweight fabric to prevent any of the funky puckering that you can get with like a standard zigzag foot. It's also great as an edge stitching foot because of these narrow sides right here. These 3 grooves on the front are going to be great for helping you with top stitching if you're going to do parallel lines and whatnot. So we can go ahead and we can sew over some nice lightweight fabric. We can double it up. Let's do like 4 layers. And you'll see how nicely it glides right over. This foot, this big toe angles right here, helps to insert the layers of fabric. And because it's so small, well, because the groove in the back really is a reason you're not going to experience any puckering. So this is a very light jersey knit, super stretchy, and we don't want any puckering with this, so we're going to use a straight stitch foot, and it just glides right over it. So easy. Then I can double it up like before. It's not going to worry about it getting stuck because it has that big toe. And then I just keep on sewing. Very easy. And if I wanted to do some maybe parallel lines, maybe some top stitching, I'll just put this back under and line up. Oh, okay, see, maybe I wanted about 1 millimeter apart. Then I have that built-in guide, those grooves. Let's take a look. So this fabric would normally be kind of a pain to sew on because it's so light and stretchy. You see how nice that is? And there's no puckering. Even with this, I mean, this is super stretchy. And then it goes sewed, it's sewed right over that big, that was like 6 layers right there. Pretty nice. This is a great foot to have if you like to sew fleece blankets or minky, any of those really nice fabrics. They're really soft, but this foot tends to stay straight instead of sometimes with zigzag foots, they can go off center and whatnot, but this one does really great. It can get really close. And once again, if you want to do the top stitching, line that up and keep sewing. And I have 2 layers right here. Pretty nice. To purchase your straight stitch foot, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com, on Google Plus, or on Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline. Hey everyone, this is Sarah with sewingpartsonline.com, and today we're going to be going over our 1/4 inch feet, and we have a couple to choose from. This is a 1/4 inch foot with the guide, a 1/4 inch foot without the guide, and this, the accessory that goes with it, is our quilting guide. I'm going to show you exactly how to use all 3. We have 2 different 1/4 inch pressure feet, one with a guide and one without. This one does not have the guide, you just simply follow along the edge. This one does have the guide. I prefer to use this one, I think it works better for me, but they are both simple snap-ons. All you have to do is remove the foot you have on, slide it underneath the shank, and clamp it on. Same for the other one. Place it underneath the shank and clamp it on. Now, to use your quilting guide, the most important thing is to have a walking foot already installed. And if you need instructions for how to install your walking foot, you can check out our video, How to Use a Walking Foot, and it has great instructions on how to install your walking foot. So you can see here in the back of your walking foot, depending on which brand you have, you either have a large hole or a shelf. So mine has a hole, so all I'm going to do is slide this in, and you can adjust this to be as close to the foot or as far away from the foot as you like, and that, determines the width of your quilting stitches. Now, to install the quilting bar onto your shank with your 1/4 inch foot already on, we're going to go ahead and locate the hole right here at the top of the shank. We just take the end of the bar and slide it through. And you slide it in and out depending what width you need while you're sewing. First, we're going to go over the 1/4 inch foot with the built-in guide. I really like this one because I find it easier to line up your fabric. So when you're doing your quilt piecing, this is really the foot that you need to make sure all those seams are perfect. Just line it up and sew along the edge. Couldn't be easier. When I get to the end, we can see that is completely even. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Open it up and it looks great. So now we're going to go ahead and demonstrate the 1/4 inch foot without the guide on the side. All you do is line your seam up against this outside toe right here. And we'll go ahead and show both seams with the guide and without, and you'll see that both are exactly 1/4 of an inch. Nice, neat, perfect. So now that we have our walking foot installed, we have our quilting guide installed, we can go ahead and start quilting. With this, I have a single piece of fabric over some batting. I've drawn one line that I'm going to follow. This is going to be like the guideline for the whole rest of our quilting. So really, you know, in other situations, you would have to draw all of your lines with like a chalk or, you know, some kind of transfer. With this, just draw one and we'll keep following it consecutively, and I'll show you how. So here we go. We're going to start, and we're just going to follow the one line as best as we can. And we're going to start all over again and follow this line. And we'll just keep doing this over and over and over again until your quilt is completely finished. So this is definitely a great time saver and great for better accuracy. Now this doesn't have to be that width, as we said during the installation. You can move this quilting guide as far or as close as you need for your project. So now that we have our 1/4 inch foot and our quilting bar installed, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to use it. The same as what we did with our walking foot, just going to adjust it to wherever I want the bar to guide me. So for instance, I can put it up all the way against the edge of the 1/4 inch foot and just use that as kind of a guide, similar to the 1/4 inch foot with the built-in guide. Or I can extend it out all the way over here, and it's going to help me make sure that all of my quilting stitches are in even intervals. This is really great for creating those like cross checkered patterns and stuff on your quilts, like when you see with pre-quilted fabric. Instead of drawing a million lines, I can just follow the same one. And if I want to go across, I've already got it measured out to what I want. There we go. Very, very easy. So that was the 1/4 inch foot. To purchase your 1/4 inch foot with or without the guide and the quilting guide, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or at Facebook at Facebook/sewingpartsonline.
Beading Foot Set, attaching narrow beads. The Beading Foot Set makes it easy to attach strings of beads, cording, yarn, or other items. The set includes 2 feet, the narrow groove foot for beads up to 2 millimeters in diameter, and the wide groove foot for beads from 2.5 to 4 millimeters in diameter. Today, we will demonstrate the narrow groove foot. Snap the foot onto your machine. Feed the beads through the slot on the front of the foot. To hide your thread as it crosses the beads, you may want to use monofilament. Choose a zigzag stitch. Begin sewing, slowly gaining speed. You've attached a string of beads.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Teflon foot. This is a great non-stick foot for any of those slippery, difficult to sew fabrics. I'm going to show you how to install it and how to use it with your projects. So this is our Teflon foot. As you can see, it is completely coated from front to back. It is a simple snap-on. All we have to do is take off the foot we have on and slide underneath and clamp it on. There we go, very simple. Alright, so now that we have our foot installed, we can go ahead and start sewing some of those tough fabrics. Right now we have a suede on, but I've also got laminate and vinyl ready to go. So let's just start sewing. You can see how easily the fabric runs right underneath the foot. You put in some laminate. Very simple. And the stitches all turn out very even. Sometimes, if you don't have a foot like this, they'll get kind of skewed and look really funky. But with this, everything slides perfectly underneath. And with this one, it's laminate, but it's got a little bit more texture. Definitely impossible to sew with a regular foot. There we go, very cool. Perfect straight stitch. Nice and even all the way across. So that was the Teflon foot. To purchase your Teflon foot, visit us online at SewingPartsOnline.com or check us out at Facebook at facebook.com/SewingPartsOnline.
The cording foot will hold 1 to 3 lengths of cord in place for cording. I will now attach the foot. For this demonstration, I'm going to use 3 cords. However, you could use the left cord groove, the center cord groove, or the right cord groove. And this is a nice satin stitch. This is called the Walls of Troy pattern, which is really nice when you want to do an edging or a border on all types of fabrics. And that's how you use the 3-way cording foot.
and welcome to FSB TV. I'm Colleen G. Lee, and coming up I'm going to demonstrate how to use a Pintuck Foot. This is what a Pintuck Foot looks like. It's short in comparison to your regular feet and it has small tucks to the front of it. Now if I just turn it to the underside, you can see there are deep grooves and this is what creates the tucks. Now you can get feet that are 3 to 5 grooves, which are for heavyweight fabric. I've got a 7 groove and there's also a 9 groove, which is for lighter fabric. What you're going to need to create these pin tucks, and they are structured pin tucks, and I'll explain a little bit about that later on. Obviously you're going to need your pin tuck. You've got a special cover here, enables you to thread the cord into, which is the bobbin cover, and you're going to need twin needles and you're going to need cording. Here I've got an example of pin tucks using the cord, and these pin tucks are rather structured pin tucks, so they're quite stiff in comparison to regular pin tucks, let's say. So what happens is, in order to create them, and as you can see there's spacing in between, is that you place your foot along the spacing that you want. So therefore my pin tucks will be created here with the twin needles, and I'm using that as a guide for the next set of pin tucks that I want to create. So whatever width you want is going to be personable to your project. If I put it on this one here, you can see I've created pin tucks here, which are where your twin needle will be, and then I've come in just a little bit so they are closer. So that's what these grooves are used for, as guides. Think of them as guides more than anything else. Now the bobbin cover should come with your Pintuck Foot, and all it does is it enables you to hold the cording into place, but it is possible to do pin tucks without this. So if you don't have this, don't be too bothered about it. So what you do is you thread the cord into the front of the bobbin cover, and there's a little tuck there in which to guide it through and then place it into position. It's as simple as that. And then I'm going to bring the cord behind the foot, so there's a tail along with my tails of my thread, and then you get your work. And I've put a little line there just to help guide me to make sure I'm doing straight pin tucks. It's not essential, but it does help. Put it onto my feet, lower my foot, and then make sure my needle are down, and then start sewing. So your cord is sitting in the middle here, and then the twin needles are going to stitch more or less on either side, but obviously it's going to be caught by one needle because that's what you want it to hold it in place. You can see the needles are stitching more or less either side of the cording, and it really is just that simple. So there you have it, your pin tuck. Now this is a structured pin tuck. Think of it in those terms because it is quite rigid in comparison to regular pin tucks because of the cording. So this is going to be a great example if that is what you want for a project, to use the cording along with the cording for. So you can have a look at what it looks like underneath. You can see how the cord is being caught by the stitching, and that is a beautiful example of a pin tuck. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you haven't subscribed, hit the button. If you want to look at some of my other video tutorials, click the links below, and I will see you next time.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today we're going to be going over how to use an overcast foot. I'm going to show you how to nicely and neatly finish your edges, as well as some decorative elements you can add to your projects. Alright, so here's our overcast foot. It's a simple snap-on, as you can see right here. This little bar in the middle is where the needle hops over back and forth to wrap the thread around the edge of the fabric. Down here is a little toe guide. So you guide your raw edge through here, the needle hops over it back and forth and it comes out a finished edge. So all you need to do is you'll take off the foot you have on, put the overcast foot underneath, clamp it on, and you're good to go. Alright, so first we're going to go over how to just simply finish any kind of edge. What you'll notice on your machine is you have some overcast stitches. For me, it's 11, 12, and 13. If you do not have any overcast stitches, you can use a zigzag stitch the exact same way. Just make sure you test your zigzag, like this, to make sure your needle doesn't hit that metal bar, because then pieces would go flying, and that would be bad. So, we're just going to go ahead and start. I'm following right along this edge. And we've got a nice finished edge. Now for a thicker fabric, I'm going to go to stitch 13 for me, which is just a different overcast stitch that's specifically for thicker fabrics. This is like a pre-quilted fabric. So it does a little bit more reinforcement to make sure that the edges are really finished well. You can see here, it's a little bit more, it looks a lot like a serged edge. So this is a great solution if you do not have a serger where you can get the same kind of look and the same kind of finished edge with these great overcast stitches. So with this overcast foot, we can also create some pretty cool lettuce edges with this cool knitted, well, obviously it's knitted, but ribbed knit fabric. So all you need to do is pull on it like this. You already have it on your overcast stitch, so just start sewing. Once again, if you have a zigzag stitch and you don't have any overcast stitches, just use the zigzag. Let's take a look. And a cool lettuce edge. Now with your overcast foot, you can also do kind of like a pseudo rolled edge like you see on your sergers, but if you don't have a serger, you can use a simple zigzag stitch. Make sure it doesn't hit the bar. There we go. And I put in some woolly nylon thread just because I like the way it looks. So here we go, and bring your zigzag stitch to a narrow, or to shorten it so it looks kind of like a satin stitch. And you'll get that really cool rolled hem that you love so much. Now let's take a look. Very pretty, looks like a perfect rolled edge that you would find on your serger, but done just as easily on your sewing machine. Now you can also make pin tucks with this foot pretty easily. All you're going to do is, well, I'll show you. I'm just going to fold the fabric over a little bit, put it underneath the foot, line it up against this guide, and I'm going to line my fabric up against the guide and kind of focus it to be just along that little finger in there, the little bar. And I'm using just some decorative thread because I think it'll kind of look kind of cool. Let's see how it looks. Now I think that looks pretty neat personally, just something different for you to try out on your projects. So another great thing that you can do with the Overcast Foot for a little decorative element is you can add some fringe, just, small fringe to your project. So I've got, I don't have my raw edge over here anymore. I just have it right here, in the middle of the fabric or wherever. So if, like, say you have a heart right here, or a circle, and you want to do fringe around it, just follow that. But for demonstration purposes, we're just going to do a line. I have my Overcast stitch selected. I went and I take the width and bring it all the way up. Take your length and shorten it to about 1.0 and just start sewing. And once again, I have some woolly nylon thread. I think it looks so cool. So we're gonna go ahead and stitch, and I'll show you how it makes the actual fringe part. Oops. So you bring it out. You see how it cooks kind of like a satin stitch, where you're just going to take your needle or your embroidery scissors or your seam ripper, whatever you happen to have, and just cut these little threads right there. Try not to cut the fabric. And there you go. You have some cute fringe. So that was the Overcast Foot. To purchase your Overcast Foot or any of the decorative threads, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline. Hey everyone, this is Sarah with sewingpartsonline.com, and today we're going to go over how to use the Stitch Guide Foot. This foot is really great for perfect top stitching. It really helps you with your accuracy. So I'm going to show you how to install it and how to use it on your machine. So this is our Stitch Guide Foot. It's a simple snap-on, as you can see. You can also see all these tiny little lines. Now these are what you're going to line your seams up with and your stitches up with to get that accuracy I was talking about earlier. So to install it, all you need to do is take off the foot you have on, take this one, place it underneath the shank, and snap it on. Now you're ready to sew. So the Stitch Guide Foot, as is in its name, is to help you with your, mainly, with your top stitching. It's incredibly accurate because all these little dashes are millimeters apart. So, if your design calls for some stitches that are only, millimeters apart, this is the foot that you want to use. So I already did one line, and I'm just going to say I want it a millimeter away from the other one. I have my needle in the center position, and I can just use that line to gauge the measurement. So this makes for some really great top stitching, edge stitching, details, and really tailored clothing. It's important to have this foot. As you can see right here. See how closely those line up together. It looks really nice. So what's cool about this is you can also use a twin needle, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of line work. You can just put in the twin needle. So your lines are about, a millimeter apart. And you can do them again at about a millimeter apart. Let's see, right there. And so again, you can do it even a little bit further apart. The point point is with this is that you do get a lot of precision. And the lines line up very well. It makes nice parallel lines. Let's snip these threads so you can see. And that's important when you're doing, you know, line designs, is to keep everything nice and parallel. And of course, fast and easy. So that was the stitch guide foot. To purchase your stitch guide foot or any of the decorative threads that we used, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline.
The 5-cord Pintuck Foot, when used with a twin needle, helps you to make perfect pintucks as well as to sew corded pintucks on shirts, blouses, and many home decorating projects. Remove the standard bobbin cover plate. We're going to replace it with the cord guide cover plate. In the middle of the cord guide plate is a hole. Feed your cord down through the bottom and then up. Replace the cover plate. Place your fabric over the cord and sew straight using center needle position. If you want a deeper pin tuck, tighten your needle tension. Once we've done our first row, we're going to go ahead and take our material out, cutting the cording from the back of the foot. There's no sense in having to refeed it through the cord plate. Once you've done your first pin tuck, go ahead and position it in any of the other grooves, depending on how far apart you'd like your pin tucks. You're going to think of your foot as like a little train, and the foot, you're going to think of your foot as a train and the cord as a track, and you're just going to run right over it. And that's how you make pin tucks.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today I'm going to be going over how to use the Satin Stitch Foot. Basically what this foot does is helps us sew decorative stitches onto satin fabric. So I'm going to show you how to install it and how to use it with your projects. Alright, so here we have the Satin Stitch Foot. As you can see, is a simple snap-on. It has a nice wide needle hole opening right there to accommodate those decorative stitches, and also on the back we see it has a nice large groove back here to accommodate the extra thickness of thread when you're sewing those decorative stitches. So to install it, all you need to do is take off the foot you have on, place it underneath the shank, and clamp it on. So all a satin stitch really is just a zigzag stitch where the stitches are really close together. So if you don't have an option specifically labeled satin stitch, just go ahead and use a regular zigzag and bring the length down really low. Now this, I'm using a metallic thread with metallic needle because I like how the decorative ones look. So let's see how it looks. Nice and pretty. So here again, we're going to go ahead and do a satin stitch, but with a scalloped edge. So all you do is select the stitch on your machine for a scalloped edge and sew. Also, a great thing to use when you're doing satin stitches is a little bit of stabilizer at the bottom to just help the stitch be a little bit more secure. So with this, I went ahead and used some embroidery thread. When you're doing these cool stitches, you want to make sure you're using the right needle. So with this scalloped edge, you can use your tiny embroidery scissors to cut around it like this. Now that we've cut off the excess fabric, you can see what a nice, lovely trim that the scalloped satin edge will create. So that was the satin stitch foot. To purchase your satin stitch foot or any embroidery threads or embroidery needles, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline.
The invisible zipper foot is used to insert a concealed closure. It is most commonly seen in garments and home decor items. This concealed closure differs from conventional zipper techniques sewn with a standard zipper foot, where the zipper application is visible from the top side. The invisible zipper foot has a hole in the center and 2 deep grooves on the underside. The zipper coil runs through the grooves on the underside of the foot so the needle stitches very closely to it. Before inserting the zipper, it is helpful to apply a fusible interfacing to the wrong side of the seam allowances, particularly when working with stretchy or unstable fabric. This will help prevent any puckering at the stitching line once the zipper has been installed. The zipper is inserted before the rest of the seam is sewn. Using a fabric marking tool, mark the points where the seam will end and the zipper will begin. Open the zipper completely. Press the zipper coils flat with a cool iron. With the right sides of the fabric facing you, place the zipper on the fabric so that the coil sits on the seam line, usually 5/8 of an inch, and the top stop aligns with the top seam allowance. Notice that the wrong side of the zipper is facing you. Pin the left side of the zipper to the face of the left seam allowance. Lower the presser foot and stitch with the left slot of the presser foot over the coil. Start at the top of the zipper and sew toward the bottom, sewing until the foot reaches the marking on the fabric, then backstitch. When preparing to sew the second side of the zipper, first close the zipper, which will prevent the other side of the zipper tape from becoming twisted. The right side of the zipper is pinned to the face of the right seam allowance, with the coil sitting on the seam line and the top stop aligned with the top seam allowance. Unzip the zipper and continue pinning down the length of the zipper tape. This time, the right groove of the foot is placed over the coil. Work again from the top of the zipper, sewing until the foot reaches the marking on the fabric, then backstitch. After removing your project from the machine, close the zipper. With right sides together, pin the remaining seam allowances, making sure the zipper tail is out of the way. At the machine, remove the invisible zipper foot and attach the regular zipper foot. Sew the remainder of the seam allowance, stitching as close as possible to the end of the zipper. Remove the regular zipper foot and replace it with the general purpose foot. Set the machine to the widest zigzag width setting and the stitch length set to 0. Sew a few stitches to form a stopper at the base of the zipper. Trim away the excess zipper tail. The result is a beautiful concealed closure.
blind stitch foot is very versatile. You can use it for blind hem appliquing. You can use it to guide your fabric, so if you're top stitching and you need to go straight, you can do that as well. But today we're going to use it for basic blind hemming on pants, drapes, dresses, shirts, etc. I will now attach the foot. To disengage your presser foot, press the quick release button on the back of the snap-on adapter. Each presser foot has a little pin. This little pin allows you to attach or detach your foot quickly and easily. To replace the foot, place the pin on the foot underneath the groove on the snap-on adapter. Lower your presser foot lever to engage. To blind hem, you must fold your material in an S shape. Take and place the fold of the material right along the guide on the foot. When the needle swings to the farthest left, you want it to just barely pierce the fold of the fabric. And you can actually hear it when it does so. There we go, perfect. When you take it out, you can see that we've gone ahead and stitched here, and there's our blind hem.
Applique Foot AP 9mm Sewing and Applique Stitch. The Applique Foot lets you take full advantage of the Horizon Memorycraft 12000's 9mm stitch width. The Applique Foot is shorter than other feet for easier cornering, and the underside is designed to let the stitching and fabric edges easily pass through. When putting it on your machine, the bar attaches to the back of the ankle before it snaps into place. On your machine's touchscreen, choose Sewing Applications. Page to Applique. Then choose your desired applique stitch. Then go into Adjust and activate the Pivot function. If your applique has corners, you'll want to activate the Cornering feature. Now you can begin your sewing. The Pivot function allows you to easily sew along rounded edges. Whenever you stop sewing, the Pivot function automatically raises the foot partway for easy movement of your fabric. If you are doing an applique that has a corner, press the Cornering function on the touchscreen. The foot will go into pivot mode, raising partway, and the stitch will be reset to the beginning of its design without the locking stitches. As you begin sewing again, your stitch pattern will start from the beginning. And now you've done a beautiful applique.
The open toe foot is perfect for applique and other sewing techniques that require an unobstructed view of the stitching area. You can also use this foot for decorative stitching and surface embellishment. The opening at the front of the foot provides greater visibility of the sewing area, and a tunnel on the underside allows dense stitches to feed smoothly. With a fabric marking tool, draw the stitching guideline for sewing on the right side of the project. Attach the open toe foot to the machine. After selecting the desired stitch, start sewing following the stitching guideline that has been marked onto the fabric. The open toe foot is also great for applying ribbons and trims. The thickness of the trim glides effortlessly through the tunnel under the foot.
Hi, this is Paula from Alanda Craft, and in this video I'm going to show you how to attach a quilting foot to your Singer Confidence quilter. These feet are also known as a darning foot or embroidery foot. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is remove the presser foot that you've already got attached. So to do that, you just press the lever at the back to pop the foot out. And then you also want to get rid of this attachment here, the shank. So you grab your trusty little screwdriver that you would have gotten with your machine, and you unscrew the screw here. Turn that a couple times. and it will eventually pop out. So that's the part you want to get rid of. Okay, now we grab our foot, and there are two relevant parts to this. You've got this part here and also this metal part at the top here. So this plastic part needs to fit where the screw, where you've just popped out the shank, and this metal part needs to fit over the needle clamp here. Alright, so we pop it under and lift it up so it fits into this part now here. But you see we've also got this metal part, and it tends to want to sit underneath, but you've got to get it over the top of that shank here. So if we lift it up, we need to unscrew it a little bit more and then push it up there. See how that metal part's now come over the top of that? So it's now sitting there. Okay, so once it's feeling like it's in the right spot, I now screw it up. Just tighten it for starters. And grab the screwdriver and tighten it. Okay. One more. Okay, so that seems pretty good in there. Now you'll notice it sits very high. Even if you bring down your foot there, it still sits very high, and it looks like it's not going to work, but it will work. So if I just grab a piece of fabric here. Okay, now remember your feed dogs will need to go down as well. Okay, so now you're ready to quilt. So let's give it a go. So you can see how that has come down. Although there was a gap there, it has come down when you start to quilt. So when you actually put your foot down, you can see the actual foot comes down as well. Okay, so that's all there is to it.
The gathering foot is used to form gathers in fabric. You can gather a single fabric, or you can join a gathered fabric to a second flat fabric simultaneously. The gathering foot works best with softer, lightweight fabrics. For gathering light to medium weight fabrics, a ruffler is recommended. The foot has a slot in the front, which is open on the left but closed on the right. The bottom of the foot comes in contact with the fabric to lock in fullness as you stitch. The gathering foot has its own shank, so it will be necessary to remove the machine's presser foot holder and then attach the gathering foot using a screwdriver. When attaching the gathering foot, be sure that the shank is properly seated on the presser bar, then tighten the screw securely. Turn the hand wheel toward you slowly, checking that the needle is correctly lined up with the opening of the foot. To gather a single fabric, set the machine for straight stitch. Move the needle to left position for the widest seam allowance possible. Place the fabric to be gathered under the presser foot and sew. It is helpful to hold the thread tails for 2 to 3 stitches as you get started, sewing at a moderate speed. Longer stitches and increased thread tension will provide the fullest amount of gathering. To gather a fabric and attach it to a second, flat fabric, first place the fabric to be gathered under the foot. Lower the presser foot to hold it in place. Then insert the second fabric into the slot at the left side of the foot. Lower the needle into the fabrics, then start sewing. Silk ribbons or strips of lightweight fabric can be gathered to create texture. Apply to your project with a satin or all-purpose foot.
Narrow hems, also called rolled hems, give a professional edge finish to any light to medium weight fabric. Even if you have a serger that does rolled hems, narrow hems sewn on the conventional machine are sturdier and have a more finished look. The narrow hem or feet are not difficult to use, but they do require practice to master, and various fabrics behave differently as they pass through the foot. Tightly woven natural fibers will roll more easily than loosely woven and synthetic fibers which resist manipulation. Fabrics ideal for the narrow hem or feet include broadcloth, quilting weight cotton, silk, tricot, and other lightweight knits, shirting and blouse weight fabrics, as well as lighter weight home decorating fabrics. Situations where narrow hems are suitable are scarves, napkins, ruffle edges, and lightweight shirt hems. Corners and cross seams can be sewn over, though the fabric has to be light enough to not create so much bulk that the hemmer cannot do its job. So as always, do a test first to see if your project is suitable for this finish. The narrow hemmer feet generally come in 3 sizes, 2mm, 4mm, and 6mm, depending on the brand. The heavier the fabric, the wider the hemmer foot you will need to use. Stitch length should be a suitable length for the fabric. Sewing narrow hems on the straight or cross grain is easiest, and you should practice on fabric cut on the straight or cross grain first, though slightly curved edges can be sewn, such as a gentle shirt tail hem. There are 2 methods for beginning to sew a narrow hem. When possible, it is easiest to sew the hems before any side seams are sewn, but you can also sew a narrow hem in the round by starting the hem midstream. The first method involves placing the fabric right side down under the presser foot and taking 4 or 5 stitches at the very edge in the hem allowance. Be sure to hold the thread tails when doing this, as the thread tails are what you will be using to feed the fabric into the foot. Next, lift the presser foot and bring the fabric slightly toward you, and then use the thread tails in your left hand to pull the fabric backward and into the scroll of the hemmer foot. Still holding the thread tails and the fabric, lower the presser foot. This is much easier to do if your machine has a knee lift. Continue holding the thread tails and begin sewing slowly, slightly tugging on the thread tails to get the fabric rolling through the foot and out the back. Another way to begin rolling the hem involves finger pressing along the hem once, then twice for a couple of inches at the start. Hold the thread tail securely and take several stitches into the folded hem. Stop sewing with the needle down and raise the presser foot, and pull the hem up into the scroll of the foot. Lower the foot and continue sewing. This method will be used when sewing hems over long corners. The remainder of the sewing requires correct guiding of the fabric into the scroll on the foot. Too much fabric rolling into the foot will create a twisted hem. Too little fabric rolling in will cause the upper edge to not turn under. While sewing, guide the fabric carefully. Guide the raw edge of the fabric along the groove to the left of the scroll on the foot. This helps to not guide too much or too little fabric into the hem. Examine your sample and decide if any adjustments need to be made. It may be necessary to bring your needle position 1 notch to the left to bring the stitch closer to the hem fold. This may or may not need to be done depending on the fabric being used. To turn corners on napkins and scarves, it's easiest to do with the wider hemmer foot widths. Using the pre-press technique shown earlier, sew the first hem edge. Before proceeding to sew the second, third, and fourth edges, take the time to clip off any uneven hem endings at the end of the hem so that you will have a nice clean edge to start the next side with. Continue using this method for all edges. Shell edges can easily be sewn on very lightweight wovens, but work especially well on tricot knit fabrics. Sew the hems as shown before, but select a picot edge stitch or a simple overlock stitch and adjust the width to wide and the length to a longer setting. If your machine does not have these stitches, use a blind hem stitch and mirror image the stitch and adjust the stitch width and length. A wide stitch width gives you a deeper scallop, and the stitch length is determined by how long of a scallop you want to have. So practice until you get the look that you want. The left straight stitches will go into the fabric, and the right swing of the stitch will go off the edge, curl the hem, and give you a decorative hem in one step. If you are having trouble getting the fabric to roll under properly, don't get frustrated. Try an alternative and use the zigzag stitch to hold the hem in place. When sewn in matching thread, it will look just as professional as the straight stitch and also be very sturdy. As any raw edges will be encased in the stitching, it won't matter if the fabric did not roll properly. Some stiffer fabrics that resist creasing are better sewn with this method. The narrow hemmer feet are great tools for making beautifully finished edges, and when you take the time to get to know how to use them properly, they will become one of your more commonly used accessories.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com. I'm going to be showing you how to use a hemmer foot. I'm also going to show you how to install it and a few techniques to make sewing with it a little bit easier. So this is the hemmer foot, and how it works is your fabric feeds into this little funnel and it's flipped over twice. And they all come in a bunch of different sizes. You can get them from a really narrow hem to a little bit larger. You can tell the size of your hemmer foot by flipping it over. You see this little groove is going to be the finished size of your hem. As you can see, this one's really small, so it's going to be a narrow hem, and it's ideal for lighter fabrics because the hem is so small. But if you wanted to use thicker fabrics, just get a bigger hemmer foot. It's very easy to install. We're just going to clamp on a little bar just like you have your foot right now. So you go ahead and press this button to release the foot that's already on. Pull it out of the way and bring it right under the shank. And there you go. Easy. So first thing you want to do is kind of prep your fabric for the hem. So think about the width that your hemmer foot is. Mine's 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to try to do that right now to start off the stitch. So I fold it over once, and I'm going to fold it over one more time. And I can either finger press it down, or you can use a pin and slide it in vertically to keep that fabric down. And this is going to be our starting point for when we get to the machine. So here we have the fabric underneath the foot. And we have our little hem that we did with our fingers by finger pressing. And now we have a little bit of our fabric is already just rolling up into the funnel. So if your fabric needs a little help getting up there, just kind of push it to the side like this and then kind of wedge it in and pull up a little bit like this. Because this is pretty much how you're going to be feeding it with these two fingers like this. It's going to need help going through the foot. So we do a couple stitches to start the hem, and it'll just go off on its own. The important thing is to make sure your fabric is going where you want it to go. So what I like to do is focus on keeping the raw edge right here on this little corner and the folded edge right here. So it's going to fold right back into the groove that I want it to go. And the fabric is going to need a little bit of help. So if you first buy your foot, you might want to practice it or practice with it a few times until you're comfortable with it, because it does take a little bit of practice. There we go. And as you can see, the fabric when you get to the end, just pull it like this to make sure that the fabric won't go over the edge. So for the small hammer feet such as this, you're going to be using it on the fine fabrics. So I really recommend putting a pin in there to keep this folded so that you can start to stitch off nicely. So we're just going to push it underneath here and we're going to line it up with a little groove in the back. Just like this. We're just going to do a couple stitches to get us started and to get the fabric secured. And now we can pull out our pin. And to get the fabric up into this funnel, keep our needle down, lift up the foot, and you're going to want to use some tweezers because this funnel is so small. Just kind of try to wedge it in there. Like this. Put your foot back down, and you're going to want to try to guide it over like this. Basically, since it's 1/8 of an inch, we're going to be feeding in a 1/4 inch fabric. So I want to be putting in at least a 1/4 inch fabric. And how I do that is I keep the fold right here on this little toe, and I'm just trying to kind of go over with the raw edge over to this. So I'm trying to eye about a 1/4 of an inch. And with the bigger ones, the kind of same thing. How much fabric is going to be folded in is how much you want just hanging out over here to guide into the funnel. And once you feel more confident with it, you can speed up. And don't get discouraged if when you're first learning to do this, it just doesn't work out that well. It takes a lot of practice to get completely comfortable, and this is just a straight line that I'm hemming, and you're gonna have to stop and start and make sure nothing's coming out of place. But once you have it mastered, it really is faster and a time saver, and it looks so professional, nice and neat. You'll love the way that it looks. And as you can see, I'm coming up to a hem, which is okay. We're gonna get up to it, and since it's fine fabric, I can fit the hem underneath there. So I'm gonna get up to it. And to make sure that this doesn't go over the edge, I'm just kind of pull diagonally towards me. It's going to make sure that it doesn't hang off the edge. You can see it's getting folded in there. And there we go, a nice, neat hem. So the hammer foot is really great to use on skirts, dresses, anything with a curve. It does work perfectly. It just takes a little bit of practice before you start. So this fabric, it's hard to tell, but it is actually on a curve. If you're a little bit scared to do it at first, you're afraid that the fabric's gonna warp, that's okay. Just do a basting stitch right along the hem to make sure that the bias doesn't tweak your fabric out of whack. So we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to keep a pin underneath here and push it underneath to line it up with that groove. Once it's in the groove, we're going to do a couple stitches to keep it secure. Lift up our foot, take out the pin. Use our tweezers to kind of put it into that little funnel. And what helps me with doing on a curve is to kind of feed it at an angle. So what I do is I start through and then just kind of sew slowly and kind of feed it at an angle, and just keep gauging to make sure that what you're feeding is a 1/4 of an inch, because I have 1/8 of an inch foot. So I'm trying to make sure that I feed in constantly the same amount. That's the most important part, is just making sure that you're feeding in the same amount of fabric. And it does help me to do it at an angle to keep with the curve. using such a narrow hemmer is really great for circle skirts and dresses because it'll keep any ripples or funky puckering out of the way, and it just looks so nice and even and very professional. And so as we're getting to the end here, keep our finger down on the fabric, making sure to guide it. And to prevent the hem from rolling off the edge, we're going to kind of pull right here. Just try to kind of keeps it where it needs to be. And there we go. Perfect. So if you come across a seam while you're using your hemmer foot, generally you don't want to try to shove this bulky seam into the funnel. It's just, it's not going to turn over right, and you're going to have the raw edges poking out. But that's okay because it already is forming like a kind of rolled hem on its own. So what we'll do is we'll use our fingers to kind of turn it under. It helps to pull a little taut at the end. And we're just going to sew right over it. So pull it out of the funnel. Keep your needle down, lift this up, position it right underneath the funnel, and just sew right over it like this. And after you get over the seam, put your needle down and reposition the fabric into the funnel. You just move it around and eventually it'll go back in there. You can use your tweezers if you need them to just pull the fabric back into this funnel and start sewing like you were before. So that was the hemmer foot. It's going to make your hems look a lot more professional, and I hope you enjoy sewing with yours.
Hi there fabric jugglers. Today we're going to be looking at the ever popular knit foot from the 32-piece presser foot collection. This has been a much requested tutorial, and I think the first person that actually requested this was Tori Robin. I hope I've pronounced that correctly for you. So if we stick around, and then you'll see how to use this rather complicated looking foot, although not quite as complex as its big brother, with a stretch knit fabric. So here we have the actual presser foot itself, the presser foot in question. If I just take you around the foot itself to begin with, we obviously have the large control piece which actually works the spring at the back. So you may be able to see the spring. Hopefully this is close enough that you can. And that spring and this arm control this little blue bit of plasticized rubber. And as that moves up and down, maybe you can see it better from the reverse, this little piece here pulls through the top layer of fabric. So you've got feed dogs on your sewing machine which pull along the lower layer of fabric. But this little baby here controls the top. This is a very small and simple version, the baby sister if you like, of a more traditional walking foot, which has a large, more complex armature, and there are a couple of extra bits of foot included and all sorts of mechanics. And this one needs to be attached using the actual screw, whereas the baby sister version, as I like to call it, is simply a bar attachment, the same as the majority of the other feet in the 32-foot collection. So I will put a link to the very complicated walking foot, but obviously this tutorial is all about how to use the simpler knit foot. So I'm going to move the camera around so you can actually see me attaching it to the sewing machine, because that in itself is really crucial. After that, it's all very simple, so we need to make sure that it's attached correctly to the sewing machine. So bear with me while I just make sure the camera's in the right position. Whilst attaching this to the sewing machine is actually a very simple process, I am trying to do this from the wrong side with the camera in my face. So please bear with me if I make this look like a bit of a dog's dinner. But it is actually very straightforward. You have the bar that attaches the needle, and you need to make sure that this piece goes above that bar. We don't want it underneath because then everything will jam up. We need it to be above so that it then works that plastic foot down here. And again, as with all the others, it is a simple bar attachment. So let's see if I can do this sort of back to front and around the wrong side. Make sure that the presser foot is raised. Make sure that this piece is coming above. If we get it wrong, it will come below. And then all sorts of problems will happen. So you need to make sure that it is going in above. And then once that's in place, then you can align the lower bar and then drop that down into position. And then push this little release if it doesn't automatically drop in. And so from the side, hopefully you can see that this back bar is now up above the holder for the needle. And everything else is in place. So we'll now turn the sewing machine round so you can see the foot in motion without any thread. And hopefully this will be a good enough view for you to see what's happening. If we pop the light on, does that work? I don't know that actually helps. So again, from here you can see that the bar goes up above the needle holder. And as this moves up and down, you'll see this is now being released, so the blue foot is moving forward and it's up, and the blue foot is down. So as you can see, it is controlled by the movement of the needle itself. So I'll just pop some thread in and then you can see that working for real. Here we have it threaded up like normal, and a piece of knit fabric, which we're just going to sew gently around the corner so you can see this in motion. as you can see, it's feeding evenly. I'm not having to worry about passing anything through, pushing or pulling. It's working entirely by itself. Around that curve. And there we have the stitch, and stitch on the reverse, and it's all moved through quite happily to be a nice firm even. Let's move that back a bit so you can see it, and here it's given a nice firm even stitch line. So it is that simple. It's all about just finding how to put the foot on. Once it's on, everything else just runs through as you would expect a normal foot to sew, without the pulling or the dragging. So hopefully this will allow you to sew with confidence using stretchy knit fabrics, which can be a bit tricky from time to time. And if so, please give the video a thumbs up. If you have any other requests, suggestions or challenges, then please drop those in the comments below. As always, feel free to share, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I release new videos every Tuesday and every Thursday. So if you've got any suggestions for future videos, or indeed which feet in this collection you're actually most interested in, please put those comments below, and I will get cracking. If you come up with a suggestion and you're one of the first, or indeed the first to come up with that suggestion and it actually becomes a tutorial, then you'll get a shout out in the video as well. So hopefully I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Hey everyone, this is Sarah with SewingPartsOnline.com, and today we're going to be going over how to use an adjustable zipper foot. This foot is really great if your sewing machine doesn't have that many different needle positions. It's also very useful for attaching cording as well as zippers. So I'm going to show you how to install it and how to use it on your machine. So this is our adjustable zipper foot. As you can see, it has the two cutout notches right here. That's where your needle would pass through when you are attaching your zipper or trim or whichever. In the back, this big wheel is what moves the foot along this shank right here. So you undo it and it just kind of moves back and forth. And you tighten it whenever you find the position you like. So to install it, you need to take off the foot and the shank that you have on. Bring it around and tighten the screw. Make sure it's snug. And there you go, you are ready to sew. So now that we have the foot installed, we can go ahead and look at how we can use this foot. So this foot's really important if you only have like one needle position. That gives you the ability to really customize where your zipper is going to be and how the stitches line up. So we have the cutout, and that's where I want my needle in between, but I want to line the zipper up against the inside of this foot. So if I can, and then I want to adjust it so that the needle is right on the inside of the cutout. So say I wanted it right there. Yeah, that looks good. So make sure my fabric is underneath where it needs to be. If you don't know how to install a zipper, you can go check out our other video, how to use a zipper foot, just a regular one, and we show how to actually attach a zipper. Normally I would hand base this, but for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to give it a go. So I have it in place, my back stitch, and I will just sew with the edge of this foot up against the zipper. And you don't have to have it that close to the zipper. I'm just showing. You can have it further away or closer together, whatever you want to do. The zipper, get that out of the way. Pull the pins out. I'm just going to sew all the way along the zipper. So I finished sewing all down this side, and we're going to go ahead and sew on the other side. And so keeping the same needle position, I'm not going to move my needle position. I'm just going to slide this over until it matches up where I want it to be. So let's move this out of the way. I want it like right along the zipper again. Check, okay. Get a little bit, adjust it a little bit further. A little bit more, just to be safe. There we go. Oh, nope. Okay. So that's where I want it to be, and I didn't have to move my needle position. I just could adjust the foot, which is kind of nice. So we're just going to go along this edge. And sew our zipper in again. So now that we sewed down both sides, our zipper is installed, and was very, very easy. So also with this adjustable zipper foot, as with the other zipper feet, you can make your own cording, piping, because we can get so close up to the edge. All this is just some fabric wrapped around some rope, you know, just regular, I think this was rope to move furniture or something. So I have my needle in the down position, and I'm going to move this over nice and close to the cording until it's nice. So I know that I'm not nipping the cording, but that I'm right along the edge of it. Move this over just a little bit more. So I'm going just along the cord. I don't want to nip into the rope. I just want to sew right up next to it. So here we go. Kind of remove the pins as you go. If you have like a glue stick, you can just kind of glue these two fabrics together. If you don't want to go through the hassle of pins. Do a little back stitch. And if this was my desired length, I would cut off the rope and cinch the ends, or burn the ends a little bit so that it doesn't like go crazy and fray everywhere. So yeah, this is some cording, piping, homemade. So that was the adjustable zipper foot. To purchase your adjustable zipper foot or to purchase any of the zippers, visit us online at sewingpartsonline.com or at facebook.com/sewingpartsonline.